Good evening. Good evening and welcome. I am Andrea Overbay. I am the director of the Robert and Joyce Johnson Center for Faculty Development and Excellence in Teaching. I am also an associate professor of mathematics here at Austin College. Thank you all for joining us this evening for the 2021 A.J. Carlson Lecture on the Liberal Arts. We're so glad that Vicki Kemp, Dr. Carlson's daughter, is here joining us this evening and that we're able to do this event in person. Dr. Carlson joined the faculty at Austin College in 1962. And while he was here, he was professor of history, dean of humanities, and a leading voice in defense of the liberal arts education. Today's lecture gives us the opportunity to pause and reflect on the liberal arts and how higher education is changing today. I'd like to welcome Dr. Lisa Brown, Dean of Social Sciences and Professor of Psychology, to the podium to introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker. And so Lori S. White is the 21st president of DePauw University. Prior to that, she was the vice chancellor for student affairs and professor of practice at Washington University in St. Louis. Before her stint in St. Louis, she was the vice president for student affairs and clinical professor of education, not far from us, at Southern Methodist University. Native of California, she attended UC Berkeley, earning an undergraduate degree in psychology and English, very liberal artsy. Her interest in psychology is not surprising, given her father, Joseph White, was known as the godfather of Black psychology. She later completed a PhD in education administration and policy analysis, with emphasis in higher education from Stanford University. Dr. White grew up in a diverse neighborhood in San Francisco where there were people of various ethnicities, immigration statuses, religions, and socioeconomic statuses, all attending public school together. Reflecting upon that experience, she said, "I thought the whole world was like my multi-racial, cultural, ethnic, religious neighborhood." She continued, "College was probably the first time I more consciously experienced racism." This upbringing and these experiences led her to her life's mission. She said, "Throughout my career, I have continued to focus on making institutions of higher education more accessible and equitable for all, particularly those who have been underrepresented in higher education." During her time at Washington University, she and her colleagues oversaw multiple student life programs, including the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, international student programs, the First Year Student Center, and athletics. And speaking of athletics, she is an avid sports fan, as she was a cheerleader herself, a cheerleading coach, and the lyricist for school fight songs at 2 former institutions. Dr. White has held leadership positions in national student affairs organizations. She has been sought out as a speaker and consultant and has received numerous awards, such as the SMU M Award, considered the highest honor a member of the SMU community can receive. She has published on a range of topics relating to supporting students. Most recently, she has co-authored a volume entitled Transformational Encounters, Shaping Diverse College and University Leaders, and another volume entitled Keep Calm and Call the Dean of Students. In anticipation of starting at DePauw, Dr. White reached out to other liberal arts college presidents to collaborate on anti-racism initiatives and create the Liberal Arts College's Racial Equity Leadership Alliance. About this new endeavor, she stated, "As a new president, I wanted to go beyond simply creating a campus task force, but instead unite with other liberal arts colleges to truly live up to the aspirational diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism values articulated in so many of our respective mission statements." Today, she joins us with a talk entitled One More River to Cross, Elevating the Value and Impact of the 21st Century Liberal Arts College. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lori S. White.
There we go. Dr. Brown, thank you so much for that very personal introduction. You did your homework and read more than just my bio, so I really, really appreciate that personal introduction. Well, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone this afternoon? Well, y'all welcomed me with a rainstorm last night. I didn't expect that, but I know certainly that we need the rain, and it's so great to be back in what I consider my adopted home state of Texas, having lived here 8 years when I worked at SMU. And it's such a pleasure to be with you today, and greetings to President O'Day, who I had the chance to meet earlier today for the first time, and you all have a great president. I hope that you know that. And one of your previous presidents, Marjorie Haas, also sends her greetings. I happened to talk with her the other day, and one of your illustrious alums, Ron Kirk, is quite a good friend of mine, and so I know Austin College is an incredible place. So last weekend, before traveling to Texas, I was at the inauguration of the president of St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana. Now, St. Mary's, you may know, is a Catholic women's college. And even though I'm not Catholic myself, I'm still feeling wrapped in the vestiges of the Catholic traditions that I experienced while I was at St. Mary's. And one of those Catholic traditions is confession. So I felt the need to start my talk with you all today with a confession. So my confession is that I never studied or worked at a liberal arts college before I became president of one. And since I was asked to deliver your annual lecture on the liberal arts, it'd probably be helpful for me to start first by briefly telling you about my journey to becoming the president of a sister liberal arts college. I knew this was going to happen. I have the smallest ears in the world, so let me try to figure this out. Hold on. And if not, we'll just use the microphone. Okay. Is this going to work, y'all? Okay. So in my family, as you know, my father has a PhD in clinical psychology, and I always tell folks that the PhD in my family is the entry-level degree. So not only does my father have a PhD, my sister, Dr. Lisa White, has a PhD in geology. And so I don't leave out the other members of my family who don't have PhDs but are also very important. My mother, who by training is a nurse, and my sister, who is a singer slash actress slash paralegal slash scriptwriter. She's the artist in the family. So I share those data points about my family not to be braggadocious, though I'm certainly proud to be part of such an incredible family. I share this information because based on what I just told you, y'all would believe that I was a very successful college student. Well, turns out not exactly. So you know I did my undergraduate work at the University of California, Berkeley, an institution that is one of the finest universities in the country and in the world, and it's also an institution of 30,000 students. I had a tough time there due to the size of UC Berkeley and the world-class faculty that I found intimidating, which is ironic because my dad was a faculty member, and my perception that every student at UC Berkeley was smarter than I was. And when I struggled academically, I think my first semester grades were C+, C-, and see me after class, and it went downhill from there. I didn't seek the support and assistance for fear of being told that I was the admissions mistake. So I drifted through the academic side of the institution, not doing any of the things that I and faculty and staff members who are here advise students to do. That is, take advantage of advising, mentorship, and the support services that are provided on campus. Now, I did have a good time at Berkeley. I majored in football games, in fraternity parties, and I had a whole lot of fun. But I sadly graduated from the university without any faculty member knowing my name or my story. And when I graduated, having never visited the Career Center, I don't even think I knew the Career Center existed on campus. And even if I'd known that it existed on campus, I think I would have been too unconfident to actually go to the Career Center. I had no idea what I was going to do with my liberal arts degree in English and psychology. And it was my dad, who was a professor at the University of California, Irvine at the time, who suggested that I get a job working on a college campus. Now, at the time, I had no idea what working on a college campus meant, other than what faculty do on campus. I had no idea that there was this whole host of other people who worked at the institution outside of faculty. But since I really had no other great job prospects, when my dad suggested I get a job on campus, I said, sure, I've been thinking about that for a long time, Daddy. So I started working at the University of California, Irvine in a temporary gig. And as I started to learn more about the campus, I discovered this group of folks on campus who advised, coached, and mentored various students. And as a matter of fact, I know we have at least one student affairs person in the room, the vice president for student affairs, but are there any other student affairs folks or people who work in student life at the university who are here? Okay, great. So I started to discover the student affairs, the student life people on campus, and I saw how they advised, coached, and mentored students, and I saw how students thrived as a result of somebody caring about them. And I thought to myself, wow, if someone at UC Berkeley had poured into me in the ways in which I see folks pouring into their students, how different my college experience would have been. And that's when I figured out those were the student affairs people on campus. And I thought to myself, I want to do what those people do. So for the past almost 40 years, until I became a college president, I'm going to tell you in a minute how I became one, I did what those people I saw doing. I worked in various areas of student affairs, focused on creating learning experiences and environments where every student with whom I came in contact could realize their hopes and their dreams. And driving my work always was thinking of every student that I had a chance to come in contact with as me. And I wanted to make sure that the me's of the world had a much better college experience than I had had. So that answers question number one, how I started working in higher education in the first place. So how did I become a college president? So to be honest, I loved my work as a vice president for student affairs. I loved the opportunity to connect personally with students, and I loved being the chief student advocate on campus and the voice for the student experience in the proverbial room where it happens. But one day, I received a call from a recruiter for a search firm telling me that I'd been nominated for the presidency of DePauw University. And encouraged by mentors, I accepted the nomination to participate in the search process for DePauw's next president. So as the process unfolded, and it looked like I might receive the offer to become DePauw's 21st president, I was inspired to say yes to the dress. That is, the dress of wearing the 4 stripes on my academic gown. Because of my interactions with the DePauw faculty and the students that I met through the interview process. And I could see and I could feel the transformational nature of a liberal arts college education. And that all of the things that had been so important to me throughout my various student affairs roles, centering students first, were embedded in the fabric of a liberal arts college like DePauw. So I can better describe this transformational education through the eyes of the student who took me on my campus tour when I was a candidate for the presidency. I was a secret shopper on the campus tour because my tour guide had no idea that I was a candidate for the DePauw presidency, which was great because I really got the honest, unvarnished version of the university. I think he thought that my husband and I were overeager grandparents looking for a place for our grandchildren to go to school. So my tour guide, his name was Dante, and he was a senior from New York City. He was a first-generation college student who was able to attend DePauw as a Posse program scholar. And while at DePauw, Dante majored in computer science and Japanese. He studied abroad in Japan. He wrote his senior thesis on how Japan should think about using robots as caretakers for senior citizens because the Japanese are having fewer children who would have traditionally been caretakers for their parents. And even before he graduated, Dante had already started his own business and had plans to move back to New York and continue growing his business. Now, a young person like Dante could certainly have been successful at any number of colleges and universities. However, I believe the close mentorship and the myriad opportunities he received at a small residential liberal arts college were key to his success and to the self-confidence I could see it in him as he guided us surrogate grandparents around the campus. And so I thought to myself, I would relish the opportunity to lead that kind of institution, an institution where the holistic development of students is the central focus, an institution like DePauw, an institution like Austin College. Well, that's before I became a pandemic president. So the pandemic notwithstanding, these are not easy times for liberal arts colleges like DePauw and Austin College, or for that matter, for higher education in general. Which brings me to the title and the substance of my talk, One More River to Cross, Elevating the Value and the Impact of the 21st Century Liberal Arts College. So you're probably wondering about the title, One More River to Cross. I love music. So in thinking about titles for my talks, there's two musical genres that I go to for inspiration. One is Motown, and the other is spirituals. So as I worked on my remarks for today, I didn't think Motown's Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Just My Imagination, or I Heard It Through the Grapevine were fitting themes for this annual lecture focused on the liberal arts. However, if this was a talk about raising money, I ain't too proud to beg, or predicting the Cowboys would go undefeated the rest of this football season, just my imagination. Or about who is going to run for president in 2024. I heard it through the grapevine. Motown might have provided the perfect inspiration. Instead, my inspiration for today's talk comes from one of my favorite spirituals, titled One More River to Cross. The use of verses from spirituals in my talks is from my cultural heritage as an African American and not from a religious perspective. Those old spirituals from my ancestors provide me with inspiration when I'm writing or speaking and often help me convey and contextualize a particular message. So the song, One More River to Cross, tells those who are singing or listening to the song that there's still rivers, mountains, and valleys to cross, climb, and walk through before reaching one's destination. In this song, the destination is the promised land of a brighter future or a place of rest. I think One More River to Cross is a fitting metaphor for where liberal arts colleges find themselves today. We must navigate many proverbial rivers, mountains, and valleys to elevate the value and impact of our incredible institutions. So let's talk about those rivers, mountains, and valleys. First, the public has lost faith in higher education. For example, a 2018 Gallup poll found that only 48% of the public, a decline of 9 percentage points from a similar 2015 Gallup poll, expressed confidence in higher education. If there's any consolation, higher education ranks ahead of the church, the US presidency, the US Supreme Court, and the medical system. Though according to the pollsters, no other institution on the list of the institutions that were surveyed saw as large a decline in confidence between the 2015 and the 2018 Gallup survey. So the reasons for the loss of public confidence in higher education are varied, though in summary, the public perception is that higher education is too expensive, is not accessible to all who might desire a college degree, and is not relevant to providing job skills. Additionally, higher education is perceived by some as too leftist and too woke, by others as not diverse enough, and debates about what constitutes free expression on campus seems almost daily contested terrain across the political spectrum. Second, I'm sure you're all aware of the predicted demographic cliff with respect to traditional 18 to 22-year-old college students. I see some nods in the room. That have been the dominant college-going population in the US. And the demographic cliff will be most steep among white college students. The typical 18 to 22-year-old college student of tomorrow will increasingly belong to communities that have been historically marginalized or underrepresented in higher education. We'll see more Latinx students, African American students, first-generation students, and students from lower income backgrounds pursuing education beyond high school. Some good news, though, for Austin College and other institutions in Texas. The South and the Southwest is the region of the country where the population of the college population is actually growing. So in the Midwest, where I live, that is not the case. So you're in a better demographic space than I am in Indiana. And as the demographics shift, and we already know this, the admissions competition for students will continue to increase exponentially. And one of my colleagues back there works in admissions, and so he knows about the competition for college students. And third, there's a declining interest in the liberal arts in terms of what subjects students are choosing to study and in terms of where students are choosing to attend college. The public questions the practicality and the sufficiency of liberal arts colleges' hallmark strengths, our commitment to teaching critical thinking, exemplary writing, collaboration and teamwork, and the ability to understand difference and engage with those whose life experiences are different from our own. Parents and prospective students ask us how any of what I just described is going to help them find a job. Those of us who love liberal arts colleges know that the liberal arts curriculum and the residential community, faculty mentorship, supportive staff, and high-impact educational practices we offer prepare our students well for the jobs of today and for the jobs of tomorrow yet to be imagined. However, the words liberal and arts are not well understood by folks who have not had the chance to be initiated into what some see as an exclusive club, not for people like me. Some think liberal means that our institutions have something to do with politics. And some think arts means our sole focus is preparing our graduates to work at Michael's. Now, I love me some Michael's, but I'm not sure that parents want to pay $100,000 a year to work at Michael's. So in terms of where students are choosing to go to college, since 2016, at least 20 private colleges, primarily small liberal arts colleges, have closed due to falling enrollments. The pandemic challenged the financial health of institutions that were already on the edge, and there are those who forecast the pandemic may accelerate college closings. And fourth, the pandemic has also highlighted inequities with respect to the student experience, widening the educational access and attainment gap between lower income and historically underrepresented minority students and middle-class white and rich students. So yes, there are many rivers for higher education and liberal arts colleges to cross. However, based on everything I've come to understand about Austin College, you all are well positioned to successfully cross that river, and that is respond to the challenges I just identified. You're a very diverse institution in terms of your student population, and you've infused a focus on global and domestic diversity into your curriculum. You guarantee 100% of your students an internship, research project, or other applied learning experience. You have a rich and deep history as a liberal arts institution, and you understand the importance of articulating and demonstrating the practicality of a liberal arts education. And you were also named as a college that changes lives. So I did my homework. So given your incredible profile, I believe Austin College, DePauw University, and other leading liberal arts colleges are called to do more, individually and collectively, to elevate the value and impact of the 21st century liberal arts college. So there are 3 ideas in particular I'd like to put on the table for our discussion. And the best part of these talks are the discussion. So I'm going to put 3 ideas on the table and want to see how you all respond to my thoughts that I'm about to offer. So the thoughts that I'm going to offer may not be those that you've typically contemplated or are contemplating in the context of the rivers that need to be crossed. The 3 ideas that I want to talk a little bit more about are shining a light on why liberal arts colleges are so expensive. That's number 1. Number 2, the liberal arts as models equally for our 2 important values of freedom of expression and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And number 3, liberal arts colleges as collaborators, not competitors. And each of those is not a half-an-hour talk, right? So I'm going to, give you some quick things to think about so that we can have a great discussion. So let's talk about the cost of a private liberal arts college education. And I think I see some students in the room, so y'all are trying to wonder, where's she going to go with this? Because I'm working 1,000 jobs to try to pay to get my education at Austin College. So yes, small private liberal arts colleges are expensive. And we must absolutely focus on access and ensuring we provide any student who desires to study with us with the means to do so, and the means in such a way that they don't graduate with $100,000 of loans. And we should utilize our resources wisely and efficiently so the public understands that the investment that's being made in the education of these young people, we are utilizing those resources wisely. However, counterintuitively, I'm going to argue that we shouldn't apologize for our cost. We're expensive because of the residential small faculty-student ratio, holistic educational experience that we offer. And because employability is what is foremost on the minds of students and your parents, rather than apologizing for our cost, we should do more to help parents, families, and the general public understand why a liberal arts education is so highly valued by employers, and that the expensive manner in which the educational experience is organized at liberal arts colleges prioritizes the skills and the experiences most sought after by employers. For example, I recently read an article in the Harvard Business Review titled, "Yes, Employers Do Value Liberal Arts Degrees." The article cited a survey of 500 business executives who rated the following learning outcomes as most important: oral communication, critical thinking, ethical judgment, working effectively in teams, written communication, and the real-world application of skills and knowledge. In this survey, 84% of employers agreed that all students need a strong foundation in the liberal arts. Now, certainly, students can achieve these learning outcomes in other than small liberal arts colleges. However, these and other learning outcomes beyond specific disciplinary and technical expertise are the foundation of the integrated curricular and co-curricular experience we offer at places like Austin College and at DePauw. And that's an experience that can't be delivered effectively without investing in faculty, in student support, in high-impact educational practices, and all of the other programs and activities that help us nurture and develop in our students the skills that are most desired by employers. And there are, of course, many, many other positive outcomes for liberal arts college students or for students who study the liberal arts in other contexts. Becoming more civically engaged as one example. I specifically highlighted the outcomes most desired by employees because of the public perception that liberal arts study leaves graduates destined to work as baristas at Starbucks. So I wanted to focus on the skills and experiences that employers most highly desire. So that's number 1. So I don't think we should apologize for our expense, but we should do a better job of educating the public why a liberal arts education is so expensive because of what we think is important for us to invest in so that students get those outcomes that employers most desire. So number 2, we must be models for the twin values of freedom of expression and diversity, equity, and inclusion. 2 values where liberal arts colleges should be seen as leaders. I read yet another article recently that quoted Frank Oakley, President Emeritus of Williams College. In this article, President Oakley said, and I quote him, "One of the factors unique to what we do as liberal arts institutions should be the ability to create genuine and productive learning communities among students and faculty. Real exchange of ideas, challenge of viewpoints, thoughtful reflections on arguments that are contrary to one's own must take place on a regular basis. There should be genuine intellectual exchange." To uphold the ideals of the liberal arts institution, President Emeritus Oakley describes what we should be required to do and says that regardless of our personal ideology or political leanings, to allow for the free expression of ideas, we must be able to do that even with those with whom we disagree, even if we disagree with them vehemently. And another quote from another article suggests that achieving these ideals have seemed to become even more elusive on today's college campuses. This article was from The Atlantic. It was titled The New Puritan, or is titled The New Puritan. And it says, related to the challenge of freedom of expression on today's college campuses, the idea of creating a space where different ideas could compete would come to seem old-fashioned. That the spirit of tolerance and curiosity has been replaced by a worldview that is not open-minded, does not think engaging differences is a great thing, and does not think that students should be exposed to competing views. That was this person's opinion. So whether the aforementioned viewpoint is accurate or not, it feeds into the public perception that colleges and universities today are not places where all ideas are allowed to flow, or that we have become places where only certain viewpoints are encouraged, supported, or allowed. So to counter this narrative and to truly live up to our ideals as liberal arts institutions, we must support free expression, including defending the rights of others, our students, our colleagues, speakers invited to campus, to say things that we may personally find abhorrent, and to not engage in cancel culture by disallowing particular views to be expressed. In a world where we increasingly live in our own echo chamber, small, residential, diverse liberal arts colleges may be one of the only places for challenging conversations and debates to occur. You heard about the neighborhood that I grew up in San Francisco, diverse in all kinds of ways. I thought that was how the world was. I learned that it's not that way, and I really believe that we're one of the only places now where I think those conversations can take place because of the nature of the experiences that we provide at liberal arts colleges. We can become models and leaders for the ideals of freedom of expression by modeling, those of us who work at the institution, faculty and staff, modeling for our diverse student body and for those external to our colleges that it is still possible in today's increasingly polarized society to use history, philosophy, science, critical thinking, moral reasoning, strong written and communication skills, and facts to engage in thoughtful debate and discussion. And I believe that liberal arts colleges have a moral imperative to be models for freedom of expression, because I'm not sure what other sector of society will be that model. And we must, those of us who teach at our institutions and lead them, be examples for our students for openness to the range of ideas across the ideological spectrum. And I'd also argue that a commitment to free expression must be built on a foundation of inclusion and equity. Diversity is a necessary condition for the coexistence of different ideas and perspectives, and inclusion a necessary condition for every member of our community to feel welcomed, affirmed, and respected. And in the context of freedom of expression, equity means developing, sustaining, and upholding a clear set of community values, standards, and expectations, such that a commitment to freedom of expression and to diversity, equity, and inclusion extends to and is lived by all of the members of our institutional community. Because in a community marked by true inclusion and equity, even fierce debates about a range of differences of opinions and perspectives are not experienced as personal attacks on one's very humanity and sense of well-being and belonging. When people feel affirmed, when they feel supported, then you can have those kinds of fierce debates, even when we disagree with one another. So committing ourselves and our institutions to holding both values of freedom of expression and diversity, equity, and inclusion in today's world is a particularly deep river to cross. But cross it we must, because as the famous expression goes, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? And my third and final idea to offer to our discussion is that liberal arts colleges as a sector must be less focused on competition with one another and more focused on collaboration. Based on the data that I shared at the beginning of my talk regarding the competition among colleges and universities for the most talented students, and the reality that many small liberal arts colleges are operating on thin financial margins and may be forced to close, we are in a survival of the fittest mode. When the dust settles, we want to make sure that our college is still the one standing. In fact, I'm about to announce a new strategic plan for DePauw, one that I hope will leave my competitors in the dust. But what would a more collaborative model look like in higher education, especially among liberal arts colleges? One that encourages us to share our wisdom and resources with one another, particularly in areas where we could be much stronger collectively. Having spent most of my career in large research universities, one of the things I most had to get used to as the president of DePauw is the smaller scale of everything at a traditional liberal arts colleges. Smaller faculty, fewer staff, and fewer resources than I had been used to. And one of my highest priorities as a new president is for my institution, as Dr. Brown said, to live up to our espoused diversity, equity, and inclusion values. My campus, quite honestly, and I'm not talking out of school because they know, because I've said this before, we've really struggled to live up to those espoused values. And it's not because my faculty and my staff and my students aren't committed. We just don't have the resources, the money, the capacity, the knowledge of the bigger schools that I used to work for to achieve all of what we desire to do related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the same may be true here. For example, following George Floyd's murder and the summer of racial reckoning, big research universities and some of the more well-endowed liberal arts colleges committed huge amounts of money and people to recruiting new faculty, doing diversity-related research in critical areas, and or who were interested or who were from historically underrepresented communities. They committed money to expand the number of staff to oversee and deliver diversity programs on campus. They were able to implement student demands and diversity task force recommendations for improving campus climate. And they committed a number of resources toward a whole host of other initiatives that my small college did not have the resources to implement. With respect to DEI, I also wondered, having left this really supportive national community of vice presidents of student affairs, to whom would I now turn as president when confronted with the inevitable diversity-related issue on campus that ended up going sideways? Who are going to be the people that I turn to for support as a president? Now, there's certainly a number of successful liberal arts consortium models, and you may belong to several, and formal associations to which many of us belong that are focused on ways to encourage collaboration amongst our institutions. However, there was not a liberal arts consortium or association specifically focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice. So necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention. And so as you know from my introduction from Dr. Brown, I reached out to the USC Race and Equity Center in Los Angeles and to 5 other liberal arts college presidents, and I said, well, what if? I said, what if we got other liberal arts colleges together to form an alliance specifically focused on DEI? Imagine if we could create a DEI learning space for presidents and for our faculty and for our staff. For example, we could all participate in similar DEI professional development across all of our campuses. We could commit to doing the same campus climate surveys of our faculty, staff, and students, so we could see where we each are as individual campuses and as a liberal arts collective, and then work together on improvement strategies. We could create more opportunities for liberal arts college faculty and staff doing DEI work to collaborate. And as presidents, we could have a safe space to work on our own development, to support one another when one or more of us is under fire for not doing enough in the eyes of some of our students and our colleagues, or doing too much in the eyes of others. As presidents, we could also use the power of our collective voice to speak up and out on DEI issues that matter. So from that imagination and my initial conversations with that small group of presidents, we launched the Liberal Arts College Racial Equity Leadership Alliance, LACRELA for short. Over 60 colleges are part of the LACRELA Alliance. And while LACRELA is not 1 year old yet, there's great potential for our 60-plus colleges to collectively move the work on DEI at liberal arts colleges forward in some significant ways. And there's still time for colleges who are currently not part of LACRELA to join. So I'm just dropping that knowledge, Dr. O'Day. This is just one of what could be many examples of the ways in which liberal arts colleges could work together on critical issues facing higher education. DEI is just one, but you can think of other critical issues where we could be working more collaboratively instead of competitively with one another. So in summary, I've offered 3 ideas for us to toss around as we think about ways in which we can elevate the value and impact of the 21st century liberal arts colleges. You know, ideas focused on the cost, ideas focused on the values of freedom of expression and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and encouraging collaboration among liberal arts colleges using the example of establishing LACRELA. And there's certainly many other ideas you may have. So in the spiritual that inspired the title for my talk, I have an image that each day the singer of that song wakes up ready to ford the next river, yet not quite reaching the promised land, but believing each time another river is crossed, she's getting that much closer. So as liberal arts colleges, our promised land is arriving at a place where we no longer have to justify why the liberal arts are so critically important. That I imagine that one day all students, regardless of the type of institution they attend, will have a firm grounding in the liberal arts. And in the words of Wynne Weevil, who's the president of Lewis and Clark College, that all students grounded in the liberal arts will have an emphasis in their educational experience on collaboration and creativity and critical thinking, that they'll value sustainability, global perspectives, equity, and inclusion, that they will be inspired to contribute to the common good, and that they're fully prepared for lives of thought, civic engagement, and to be fully engaged citizens of the world. So folks, let's keep trying to cross that river. So thank you very much.